time, I'd like to call the Caswell County Planning Board meeting to order for January 17th, 2023. Excuse me, this is actually the Caswell County Watershed Review Board Appeals here. I thank everyone for being here today. At the outset, it's come to my attention that Commissioner Nate Hall has passed away. At this time, if we could take a brief moment of silence in his honor. Okay, thank you. So we are here today for the chair to issue the decision on the motion to dismiss in the matter of the appeals from the issuance of the watershed protection permits and the special non-residential intensity allocation permits to Carolina Sunrock LLC and to E-Tree LLC. We have approximately 10 copies of the order to be passed out today, and I'll rely heavily on our attorney, Mr. Robert Hornick, to my right. Should I go ahead and pass out the orders at this time?
Yeah. Council.
Sure.
If you have this.
Thank you. So I'll briefly recite some of the portions of the order, which is about 5 pages long. And I'll just like to say, this is an order that myself and Attorney Hornick have reviewed for the last several months. There's been a lot of case law to decipher. Had to review a lot of the general statutes, as well as our own local ordinances here in Caswell County, including the Unified Development Ordinance. This wasn't a decision that was easy to make. We went back and forth on a lot of the issues. I'd like to thank the attorneys on both sides for presenting some very well crafted arguments and some strong arguments on both sides. So again, this was not an easy decision to make, but we did have to come to a decision today, and we did. And of course, I'll remind all parties that if there is disagreement with this order, that it can be appealed. And I think, Mr. Hornick, we have set a 10-day deadline.
Right. Counsel for the parties and Mr. Johnston and I had been in communication last week. And we decided that as a matter of really fairness to everybody, that we would allow, instead of saying if you want to appeal, you have to decide right here, right now, and argue the appeal with this board, that would give 10 days for the parties to submit notice of appeal. And then upon the expiration of those 10 days, if anybody has appealed, then we would schedule a meeting hearing with the entire board here again, whether it's at the February meeting or some other time. That's a matter of scheduling, I think, so that the appeals could be heard. And then after that, there could still be an appeal to Superior Court. So we, working on this opinion, are fully cognizant that somebody or somebodies are not going to agree with it, and somebody or somebodies are likely to appeal, and that there is and are avenues for appeal available.
Thank you, Mr. Hornick. With that being said, I'll just read briefly some of the matters in the order. Under the preliminary matters, these matters came before the Caswell County Watershed Review Board on the appeals made by more than 50 appellants seeking reversal of the issuance by the Caswell County Watershed Administrator of permits for 2 sites in Caswell County, the Burlington North site and the Project Hill site. The watershed protection permits and the SMEA permits for both sites were issued pursuant to authority granted to the Watershed Administrator by Article 10 of the Caswell County UDO. Under the, we do need to note that several of the remaining appellants have withdrawn their appeals. They are Gene Roberts, Herman Roberts, Kim Merritt, Lawrence Merritt Jr., Sylvia Saunders, Homer Saunders, Jennifer Connor, and John Connor, and Stephen and Virginia Peach. So they have asked to withdraw their appeals, and this forum does allow for them, they are officially withdrawn from the appeals. Under this discussion item, as an initial note, Sunrock has argued that the various appellants, or most of them, do not have legal standing to maintain their appeals. That issue is not now before the chairman or the WRB on these motions, and therefore, for purposes of this discussion, the chair will assume, but does not make any formal determination, that at least one appellant does have legal standing. Here in January of 2021, the watershed administrator issued the watershed protection permits and the SNIA permits for both sites, and appellants have appealed the watershed administrator's decision. The Watershed Review Board is empowered to hear and decide appeals from any decisions or determination made by the watershed administrator in the enforcement of these regulations. And that language is found in UDO section 10.10.6.1. Further down in the discussion, the moratorium ordinance adopted by the Caswell County Board of Commissioners was established on January 26, 2020, and then extended on January 4, 2021, and expired on July 6, 2021. While the moratorium was in effect, Caswell County considered, and on December 21st, 2020, ultimately adopted the High Impact Development Ordinance, which by terms would apply to developments such as those proposed by Sunrock. However, we must consider the impact of the permit choice statute found in North Carolina General Statute section 143-755A, which we believe applies to the situation here. That statute reads in part as follows: if a development permit applicant submits a permit application for any type of development and a rule or ordinance is amended, including an amendment to any land development regulation, between the time the development permit application was submitted and a development permit decision is made, the development permit applicant may choose which adopted version of the rule or ordinance will apply to the permit and the use of the building, structure, or land indicated on the permit application. If the development permit applicant chooses the version of the rule or ordinance applicable at the time of the permit application, the development permit applicant shall not be required to await the outcome of the amendment of the rule, map, or ordinance prior to acting on the development permit. Further down in the discussion on page 4, the Watershed Review Board Chairman has tried to reconcile the language in the moratorium ordinance prohibiting any approval required by Caswell County, which would seem to apply to the permits involved in these appeals. But that has to be reconciled with the permit choice statute, which allows Sunrock to decide which set of rules it wants to be applied to its applications because they were filed or any changes to the otherwise applicable ordinance took effect. Given the language of the permit choice statute and case law holding that because land use regulations are in derogation of common law property rights, any ambiguity in the regulations must be resolved in favor of the property owner. The Watershed Review Board Chairman holds that the watershed administrator made no error when he issued the watershed protection permits and SNIA permits for each of the sites in January 2021. Even though the extended moratorium ordinance was still in effect in January of 2021, when the permits were approved, North Carolina General Statute 143-755A provides that Sunrock need not have waited for the outcome of any potential ordinance amendments before acting on the permits, though it appears they have done so anyway. So in conclusion, for all the reasons stated, Sunrock's motion to dismiss, in which Caswell County joined, is granted and the appeals herein are dismissed in their entirety. And Mr. Hornick, is there anything you would like to add?
All I would add to that is there were a lot of interesting academic issues involved in this. Mr. Johnson and I worked hard to try to come up with a reasoned opinion, and we realized that parties have an opportunity to appeal, may not agree with us, and that's okay. That's why there are appeals. So I understand that some will be disappointed, others won't be, but this is the way the process works, and I wish everybody good luck with the process.
And we do have a few extra copies of the order here if council would like copies. And Mr. Hornick, how would we get these copies?
I think Shannon's got it over there.
Perfect, okay. All right, thank you all, and thank you all for being here. And there is the 10-day appeal period, and we'll be glad to, you would consult with council after if you have any questions.
Yeah. And that 10-day appeal period would expire on Friday, the 27th, counting 10 days. It's a higher math for me, but appeal should be submitted in writing to me. Email's okay, but by the end of business on Friday the 27th.
And Mr. Hornick, if there is an appeal, I assume that would be heard at the regularly scheduled February planning board meeting?
I think that would be the preference, but I understand from talking to Matthew that that meeting may be pretty well stacked already with planning board matters. So I don't know the date on which that hearing would be held.
Mr. Hogan, would you care to enlighten us?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a likelihood that the February planning board meeting will be pretty extensive. The biggest item is that there's a pending solar farm development in the southwestern corner of the county, which is regulated by the high impact development ordinance. That ordinance requires a public hearing for those types of developments, which would have to be conducted no earlier than 5:30 in the evening. So if that is ready to go in February, then the meeting would be shifted from your normal 1 o'clock time down to 5:30. Also got a possible cell tower on the agenda that day and possibly 2 major subdivisions on the agenda for that meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hogan. So I suppose we will wait to hear from council and then make our decision after that, Mr. Hogan.
Thank you.
Okay, with that being said, this concludes the Watershed Review Board Appeals hearing, and I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
A second.
Motion to adjourn by Mr. Harris and second by Mr. Foster. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Meeting's adjourned. At this time, I'd like to call the Castle County Planning Board meeting to order. This is a special meeting in lieu of our regularly scheduled meeting for next Tuesday. The agenda was set for 2:00 p.m. today, and we're a little bit early. And in consultation with the planning board attorney, Mr. Bob Hornick, he indicated to us that as long as there were no public hearings set on the agenda, then we would be able to proceed before 2:00 p.m. As long as there's no objection from any fellow members or any staff. I see no objection, so we will proceed as scheduled. We have public comments. Mr. Hogan, are there any signatures on the public comment?
No, sir. I don't believe we have any signs for public comments, but I can go check one last time.
That's okay, I'll check. See no public comments on the list. We do have folks present today, and anyone would like to say public comments that's present in the audience?
Oh, thank you.
Okay, all right. Moving on to item 3, election of officers. I'll entertain a motion to move into the election of chair. We'll now take nominations for chair for the planning.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Russell Johnston.
Okay. Nomination by Mr. Harris for Russell Johnston.
Second.
Any other nominations? Okay. Hearing no other nominations, we have a motion and a second for Russell Johnston as chair. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Next, we have the election of vice chair. Do we have any nominations for vice chair?
Mr. Chair, I would like to nominate Scott Oakley as the vice chair.
Okay. A nomination by Mr. Foster, Scott Oakley. Okay. Any other nominations?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Michael Petit.
Okay. Nomination by Mr. Harris for Michael Petit. All right. Any other nominations? Seeing none, we'll first have a vote on the first nomination by Mr. Foster for Scott Oakley. All those in favor of Scott Oakley to be vice chair, please let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All those, okay, all those opposed, like sign. All right, we have 2 ayes. So 2 votes for Mr. Oakley. Okay, next nomination is for Mr. Michael Petit as vice chair. All those in favor of Michael Petit, please let me know by saying aye. Aye. If you could, let's take if you would raise your right hand for that vote, please. So 4 votes for Mr. Michael Petit. So Mr. Michael Petit will be the vice chair for 2023. Okay, and next we'll have oaths of office, and the chair will recognize the clerk to the board, Carla Smith. I'd like to thank her for coming up early. I understand she was on her lunch break, so we do apologize. Appreciate you coming up to administer the oaths. This will be for Russell Johnston and Ron Richmond.
Okay. Just so we can, do you want to do it up there?
Wherever you'd like.
We can do it wherever, as long as they're on camera.
I mean, I can do the podium, I can do the middle, left, right, anywhere's fine.
It doesn't matter as long as they're on camera. I know they probably want to be on camera, so. Right hand on the Bible. And y'all both gonna do it. And the oath is I, Ron Richmond, and Russell Johnson. You want to just do him? Okay. I, Ron Richmond, do solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear
that I will support and maintain
that I will support and maintain
the Constitution and laws
the Constitution and laws
of the United States
of the United States,
and the Constitution and laws
the Constitution and laws
of North Carolina,
of North Carolina,
not inconsistent therewith,
not consistent therewith,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
my duties as a member
my duties of a member
of the Caswell County Planning Board.
of the Caswell County.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Okay, and I will need your signature here. And then I'll follow with the registration and get you a copy of that. Okay. I, Russell Johnston,
I, Russell Johnston,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support
that I will support
and maintain the Constitution
and maintain the Constitution
and laws of the United States
and laws of the United States
and the Constitution and laws
and the Constitution and laws
of North Carolina,
of North Carolina,
not inconsistent therewith,
not inconsistent therewith,
and that I will faithfully
and that I will faithfully
discharge my duties
discharge my duties
as a member
as a member
of the Caswell County Planning Board.
of the Castle County Planning Board.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Okay. We'll just get your signature, and then I'll follow, and I'll get you a copy. Thank you, Nancy. Appreciate it. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Carla. Next on the agenda, we have the approval of the September 27th, 2022 meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review? All right, hearing no input, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the September 27th, 2022 meeting.
Motion by Mr. Foster to approve,
Second.
second by Mr. Oakley. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Minutes are approved. And now we'll recognize Mr. Matthew Hoagland for the Planning Department updates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We actually have a special guest with us today, County Manager Brian Miller would like to report on broadband issues.
Chair recognizes Brian Miller. Thanks for coming today, Mr.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Share that.
Yep.
So I'm happy to answer any questions about any area of the county that any of the planning board members have. I'll give you a brief update on, you see the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund here. So I have met with Spectrum recently, and they're constantly building out. You see the spools, you see the cable, you see them working all over the county. They've spent a lot of time working up along Park Springs Road in this area of the county, Quick Road in those areas. I was informed that there's a, what's it called, Carl? I'm putting Carl on the spot. It's some kind of reporting, that before they can turn over phone numbers from Spectrum to, or no, from Brightspeed, CenturyLink Brightspeed to Spectrum, Spectrum has to sign off on some kind of report that lets them port the numbers over. Spectrum's reluctant to offer service in that area of the county right now until Brightspeed signs off on that, an agreement to port the numbers over. So there's about 700 addresses in that one area that's set and ready to go. They're ready to turn on tomorrow as soon as Spectrum, or as soon as Brightspeed signs over those agreements to port the numbers over. And they're legally obligated to sign those agreements. They've signed them for other parts of the county. They just haven't signed them there yet. And it kind of sounded to me like Spectrum really doesn't know why that they haven't signed them, but they haven't. We expect that they will. And if they don't within the next couple of weeks, we'll go ahead and start working. I've spoken to the Rockingham County manager, and he and I will work with Brightspeed to try to get those signed as quickly as possible. So that's good for that area of the county, that they're seeing some movement. Within the rest of the county, they've turned on about 1,100 addresses, and they fell a little bit shy of their 1,000 addresses for November and December that they had wanted to turn on. But we're at about 1,100 addresses, total overall for the county. They're still going to continue working in a clockwise manner. So once they finish this area, they'll move this way and keep on working down and around. I know they have just started working again in the kind of central part of the county, down in here off Oakview Loop Road. So they're in here and they'll move on over with that crew after that's complete. Have y'all heard about Zytel winning the Great Grant Award?
Yeah, that was at the September meeting, so it's quite a while ago.
So this is the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. It's a federal grant that we're talking about here. So there's a state grant called the GREAT Grant. And an award was made for Cowsville County, and I think it was about $4 million. That award was given to a company called Zytel. Now, the area that Zytel is going to cover, I like to call it Yanceyville North. So anything not in green here that's north of Yanceyville basically is going to be covered by Zytel. Zytel is basically a small internet service provider from Montier, Virginia. And their business model is they lease dark fiber and build off the dark fiber that you have in your county. And by dark fiber, what I mean is unused fiber that other companies have in the ground that they're just not using. So they'll lease those strands of fiber and build off of that. So I think they've got about 2,000 addresses within the county that Zytel's going to build to. Any questions about Zytel? The state plans to let contracts with the GREAT Grant recipients. Draft contracts were supposed to go out no later than the end of this week. Soon thereafter, they assume that those contracts will be signed by the internet service providers. I have spoken to Zytel. Zytel's ready to hit the ground running with their installation process. So that's good news, but the bad news is that they do have a 2-year build out window. So they can take up to 2 years to do this. There's 2 more grants available, but I'm going to ask if anybody has any questions about Zytel first. No. So there's another grant award through the state, and it's called CAB. It's either continuing access to broadband or completing access to broadband, one of the two. So what it does, it allows the counties to be a little bit more involved in the process, and we get to pinpoint the areas that we want to provide service. And it is especially helpful for us because the federal definition for broadband is, what is it?
25 megabits per second download speed and 3 meg.
Yeah, so it's real low, right? So in the CAB program, we have the ability to say, okay, that's not what we're going to call broadband. We're going to call it, a minimum of 100 up, 100 down, synchronous kind of broadband access. So, so there's another grant process that we'll try to apply for, and there's money there for it. Every county that applies for it will receive funding for it. But we'll try to target some of the unserved areas within the county, say Yanceyville South, that you see in the white here with the CAB program. Then there's one last program, and I don't know what it's called, but I call it the Last Mile program. And basically what it is if you have a residence sitting 3/4 of a mile off the street, that's maybe a road's got 2 houses on it, and the first house is more than that 1,500 feet away, that CenturyLink or Spectrum or Zytel is required to serve, then the customer would contact the internet service provider contacts the state, and together they work together to convince the state to kind of fund that last mile. That's a little bit cumbersome, to be quite honest with you. I think it puts some of our residents that are at most risk, or at least are the least qualified to deal with these kind of issues, in a position where they've got to deal with a governmental agency that they're probably not equipped to deal with. So I've asked the Board of Commissioners to allow me to intervene on our residents' behalf and work with the residents to work with the internet service providers and I'm sure Matthew will play a big part in this too, to work with those internet service providers and help our people make sure that that last mile money comes to residents of Castle County. So that's kind of the plan that I have for building out the rest of the county. A lot of it's facilitated by the state. A lot of it we don't have control of it. Some of it we're going to have marginal control over. But I'm happy to answer any questions you have about internet.
Mr. Miller?
Yes, sir.
Did you say that the criteria within Caswell County is 100 megabytes up and 100 megabytes down, or that's just an example?
That's just an example.
Okay.
So I think the packages that Spectrum's offering now are 320. I don't think they're even offering anything less than 300 now. And I think there's a push to have those become synchronous. So you wouldn't have a 320, 300 download and 20 upload. It would be 200 up and 200 down, or so they would both be the same. So I think there's a push to do that, but all of it's fiber, and fiber's capable of handling, up to a gig, more than a gig. But I think you'll see offerings of 2, 3, 4, 500, up to maybe even a gig. I know Spectrum offers a gig if you want.
Question, so, for the areas where Spectrum is located, are there other companies can come into those areas from a competition standpoint?
Yes, they can. So one of the things, can you zoom in on this map?
Sure.
And it doesn't matter where, just get me along the edge of one of okay. So these were built by census blocks, okay? The Ardolph area was built by census blocks. That's the way the federal government allowed the internet service providers to provide service in these areas. So for instance, here, what road is this, Matthew? Can you tell?
I can't see what you're pointing to.
Okay. Any road. Give me a road on the edge.
Can you see my mouse?
Yep.
That should be Highway 86.
Okay, so you're looking at 86 here. So you see one side of 86 is covered and the other side is not, right? So Spectrum, I mean, they would be pretty foolish not to offer service to the people on the left side, right? Because it's extra customers. So even though that somebody else has claimed that territory as servicing that territory, Spectrum's still going to offer service there. And it's going to be the same way with, if Zytel has some of these areas that butt up to Spectrum's areas, Zytel will also offer service in Spectrum, Ardolph territory, and vice versa. So
And that's a good thing, right? Because of competition, it keeps.
It is. It is. The more choices that our residents have for providers, the better off we are. I'm not going to promise you it's going to drive down prices. Theoretically, it would, but for the number of people we have in Caswell County, I don't necessarily see it drive down prices, but you still have options. You get mad at one service provider for whatever the reason, they can do whatever they need to do and go to another ISP if they want to.
Mr. Miller, how can we help out the process from the planning board's perspective?
I don't know right now that there is a good way. I think when we get into the planning for CAB, I think there may be some places there for the planning board to step in. And I think we're going to need to be real strategic about how we go about going through that process. So I'd love to have input from the planning board when we get to that process. I skipped over something, if I can go back just a little bit. Can you get me down to Cherry Grove Road, Matthew?
Yeah.
Anybody live down around Cherry Grove Road? Okay. So, you see Cherry Grove Road comes down through here and all that's covered, and then it stops being covered here, and then it picks back up here, and then it's uncovered pretty much all the way to the end of the county. I do want to let everybody know that I've worked with Justin Delancey from Spectrum, and I've showed him the density along the population density along this road. I actually took him out. We rode the road as well as here and some of the side roads as well. And asked him and Spectrum to reconsider that area. They have another branch of their business called the BAU. I always feel like I'm on a CSI show when I say that, but it's business as usual, instead of something else. Anyway, the business as usual team is considering coming back in and serving those addresses. And at our last meeting, Justin made me aware that they had picked up another, I want to say 191 addresses along Cherry Grove Road in that area of the county. So I think we're moving in the right direction. They're also very heavily considering 10 or 11 houses down Graves Road that would move that up to about 200 houses. I'm very hopeful for the Graves Road houses as well. So anyway, long story short, I think we've got a good plan for the county. I think we're moving in the right direction. I think we'll be there. We're not going to be there quick enough for most people. You know, people see fiber laying on the side of the road, they get excited. You know, when's it coming to my house? When's it coming to my house? And it's not going to be as long as it has been, but it's not going to happen tomorrow.
So Mr. Miller, do you think we'll be finished within Caswell County by within, let's say, April, May?
Do I think Spectrum will? No.
No.
No, I don't. And I'm hesitant to set any time deadlines because honestly, they've come out with time deadlines before and said, we'll be here by May. And September, October, they were there. You know, it's out of my hands. You know, I could relate to you guys what I'm being told, but I found that to be off. And then, you know, if I'm telling you it's going to be there by this date and they don't come through, then it kind of makes me look like I don't know what I'm talking about. So I'm a little bit reluctant to give dates. You know, do I think they're working and working hard, and I think they've got probably half of their build out. I think they've probably got half of their area in Caswell County built out. So I think that's a good sign. I will tell you, Caswell County, they had to 2026 to build all of this area out. They started in Caswell County. Caswell County wasn't the second place they started or the third place they went. They started in Caswell County. So that's very encouraging to me. I know they want to finish in Caswell County and get along to their next build out. So I would assume they'll do that as quickly as possible. Another thing that's kind of given us a little bit of leverage that maybe we didn't have before is through the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, there was a new presidential election a while back, and President Tracy Johnson chose broadband as her theme for the entire year. Based on that, she chose about 15 people to be part of her presidential task force on broadband. I was very humbled that President Johnson asked me to be on her task force for that. So we've had 2 meetings so far. That puts me in a lot more direct contact with NCDIT and gives me a larger voice, gives Caswell a larger voice to address our needs. So I think that's encouraging. But it's kind of where we are. Any additional questions?
Thanks for all you do.
Yeah.
Appreciate the updates. It looks like we're making progress.
Happy to help any way I can. So Carla and I, if you don't have any questions, Carla and I are going to leave. And if you need anything else, come back. All right, thank you all. Thanks, Carla.
Matt, do you have any other updates?
I do, yes. With regards to cell towers, I've got quite a few updates. After the last meeting back in, I think, late October or early November, I heard back from Doug Marker with HK Consulting. If you'll recall, he had 3 cell towers run through the approval process in, I believe it was 2021, in west on Highway 158, in High Towers, and then in Prospect Hill as well. His email to me in late October was, the West Castle and Prospect Hill tower construction is complete. For both of those towers, Verizon is currently getting fiber to the towers, and they should be turned on ASAP. I don't recall driving past the West Caswell site, but I drove past the Verizon, or the Prospect Hill site twice in the last week, and I had maybe 2 or 3 bars of service. So I'm not 100% sure if that tower is active. It seemed like the service was better, but maybe not as full as you would anticipate being right there next to the tower. He has not pulled a building permit yet for the High Tower site, even though he had planned to by now. I think it's just still in the normal environmental review processes and other regulatory processes. And that will now be an AT&T tower. It was, when it went through the permitting process, it was slated to be Verizon, but it'll be AT&T, and I think that is partly because of the Stephentown Road tower that was approved just a few months ago. With regards to the Stephentown Road tower, I heard back from George Davis with TowerCom just last week. They have received FAA approval, and they have turned over all their approvals to Verizon for final regulatory compliance. So now they're waiting to hear back from Verizon for the final green light. Once they hear back from Verizon for the final green light, then they're ready to go. As far as I understand, they have everything ready to go for construction of the actual tower. It's just a matter of getting that final thumbs up from Verizon. Similar to that, there's a tower that was approved on North 86 last year, over on the west end side of 86 at the end of David Sarton Road, if I remember correctly. The developers have come back to us. Apparently the rights to build that tower have changed hands, and the new developers want to build a guide style tower as opposed to a standalone tower. So the standalone tower that was approved basically had 3 legs and was self-supporting all the way to the top. The guide tower is obviously anchored down by guide wires. Because that is what our ordinance basically defines as a substantial modification, then approval is going to have to come back from the planning board. It's just a matter of amendment. So all other things should be the same: setbacks, FCC clearance, lease with the property owners. Everything should be the same except for the actual tower and equipment that they propose to build. And that may be on the agenda as early as February. In addition to that, with regards to the February agenda, so as I mentioned during the appeals hearing, this could be quite a lengthy meeting for February. I've got a pending solar farm that would require a public hearing, the cell tower if they're ready, and then possibly 2 major subdivisions as well. And then if the appeals is continued to that day, then that would mean the appeals hearing would be that date as well. The HIDO requires that the public hearing for a solar farm be conducted no earlier than 5:30 in the evening, so that would be an evening meeting that could last hours and hours. So I'm not 100% sure how to handle it, but I at least wanted to make the board aware of all the traffic coming your direction.
Will that be held here or at the library?
I believe that's a great question. I believe it would have to be held here.
And now would be a good time, I guess, to ask fellow board members, would 5:30 that evening work for everyone? Check your calendars.
And that meeting date would be the 28th, by the way, the very last day of February.
Okay.
So that's all that I have. Again, all of that is just pending. It could be that for whatever reason, the subdivisions and the cell tower are not ready to go by February, but it looks like, at this point, it looks like they would be.
Thank you for the updates, Mr. Hoagland.
Yes, sir.
And I forgot to mention something earlier. I forgot to welcome Commissioner Tim Yarborough to the board. He's a new ex officio member to the board. I'd like to welcome Tim. And with his farming background and deep roots in the county, I know he'll be a huge asset to the planning board. I'd like to welcome him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for serving. No other updates, Mr. Hoagland?
No, sir, that's all we got.
I'd like to recognize Mr. Oakley at this time. There were questions about the Castle County Comprehensive Plan, which requires us to review with the Board of Commissioners each year, and I'll recognize Mr. Oakley briefly.
Okay, thank you. So, the board will recall, several months ago, we discussed and thought it'd be a good idea to have a joint meeting with the Board of Commissioners. I guess over the last month or two, we've started to look at a possible agenda for that. And so the basic idea of the meeting and the content there would be to meet with the board. We have quite a few new commissioners, so Matthew was agreeable to help go in and basically give a training of what is the roles and responsibilities of the planning board, along with what is the comprehensive plan and the annual updates and those types of things. So again, we don't have a date for the meeting, but maybe we can see if we can proceed and get that scheduled. And we can continue to work on the content to be presented there. If anyone on the board would like to contribute content or be a part of that presentation or meeting, just let us know. We're just trying to develop something that will be productive. The idea would be to go in and meet in the first round here and basically do the training and present some basic information, and then have a follow-up meeting to come back and actually get the Board of Commissioners input on, hey, is there anything that they would like for us to work on in the this coming year. So that's basic update.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Oakley. Yes, so Mr. Hoagland, at your convenience, maybe I think it might not be a bad idea just to reach out to Mr. Miller and see how we could coordinate this, because I know we have a lot of rotating schedules on the board, and I'm sure it goes the same for the Board of Commissioners. So
yeah, I'll be happy to do that. And I briefly spoke with the county manager prior to this meeting and thought about having that on the agenda, at least as a discussion item. But from what I understand, the commissioners haven't really discussed meeting with the planning board either. So it's just kind of one of those issues that's up in limbo. And with the unfortunate passing of Chairman Hall, I don't know if, I know, for example, their meeting tonight has been canceled. And so their schedule just may be shuffled quite a bit. But I'll be happy to follow up and just see, kind of gauge the board's interest, the commissioner's interest in meeting and setting a date.
okay, thank you, Mr. Hoagland.
Yes, sir.
All right, and after you mentioned Commissioner Hall, I'd just like to reiterate, I know we had a moment of silence for him during the Watershed Review Board hearing, but I'd just like to reiterate, I'd like to recognize him for his public service over the years. He was a Board of Commissioner for many years. Thankful for his service, and our prayers go out to his family. All right, that being said, any other updates for the board? All right. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn at this time.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Mr. Harris. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Meeting adjourned.